on the last leg of the Maimer. We are holding on page Yud, top of the page. We were talking about the different levels of the tshuva. There is the tshuva that there's every level of tshuva corresponds to what it says in the pasuk. It says sur merah seitov bakisholom v'radfeu. Sur merah, that's the level of tshuva that has to do the basic tshuva to remove any separation of not malakalam, can't be alekechem, which is the level of malakalam, can't come in us and become alakashalonu because I'm nesechem hoyim avdilim. The sur merah removes that. The Aseitev is a higher level that draws down from the level of Soivev Kalamin. That is, these two are two levels in Shuva Tata. They correspond to the Hey Tata and the Vav of Yudke Vavke, which corresponds to Zah and Malchus. Then there's a level of Baki Sholem. Sholem is going on Torah. Torah is higher than Soivev Kalamin. Malkalam joins the two together. That is a level of the higher Hey of Yud Kei Vav Kei, and then there is the level of the Yud of Yud Kei Vav Kei, which he doesn't really explain over here, but it corresponds to Chachma, and in other Mamorim he explains it has to do with the level of an entire and a complete bittul, the Metzias. It's like in other places the Rebbe also says, in addition to what we spoke about yesterday, that there is I think we spoke about yesterday how it's the level of bittul and Metzias, that there is the Seder is Yira Tata, Ava Zuta, Ava Rabba, and then Yira Ilah. The order is first you have the minor Yira, the basic Yira, the Yira that we just now started learning in Chitas or Perik Mamalach. You have the level of just basic bittul Kabbalah soil, recognizing that Hashem is our king, and therefore we need to be mevatl ourselves to the Eibishter. That is corresponding to the lower Hey of Shemit Kevavki and so on. Then there's a level of a minor love, a love that's based on intellect, a love that's based on our understanding and appreciation of Hashem, or maybe even less than that, the level of the innate love, the Avim Soteris. Then there's Ava Rabba, a greater love. A greater love is a level that's Ava that's higher from Tavadas or higher than the innate love. That is the level of the Hey. That has to do with Bina because it has to do with the meditation, has to do with the understanding of godliness, not just the innate love. Then there's the Yud. Either the Yud is going on the complete bittul and metzias of Yira Ilah, or the Yud of Shemit Kevavke is going on the level of bittul or the complete losing of one's metzias in a Ava Betanugim. The levels of love that we were speaking about before is a level of Ava Kirish Pe'esh, the flaming, fiery love. The Ava Betanugim, if you remember in Perek Gimel and Tanya, he says, the love of the light, that love is rooted in the Spheres HaChachma. Spheres HaChachma is the Yud of Shem Yud Kevav Ke, and that is a tshuva that's connected with that. A tshuva that's connected with the higher level of bittul. A tshuva that's connected with the level of Ava Betanugim. That is the fourth level of tshuva going from the bottom up that he said. There's four levels of tshuva because there's four levels of geula. And since tshuva brings geula, so therefore we have to go through four levels of tshuva to get to the levels of geula. And that's why we have the four cups, and that's why we have the four children by the Seder, etc. So now he goes on page Yud, the top of page Yud, Ois Dalet, the beginning of the page. Kенeged Arba'a Madreges Shebetshuva, corresponding to these four levels that there are in Shuva. So now we're going to go back to what we mentioned, that they correspond to the four psukim, that because of them we drink the four cups. Yeshnan Gam Arba L'Shoyin Shel Geula. There's also the four expressions that's used in the pasuk about redemption. The idea behind this is the Masha Kasa Vaytseisi Escha. The first language of redemption is that I will take you out. But the Rebbe is going to examine it in light of the entire phrase. It says, I will take you out from under the burdens of Mitzrayim. Who inyan sur merah. That's the first level of tshuva, the idea of turning away from bad. That's the idea of sivlis Mitzrayim. Ya oven who kaveh. A sin is heavy. Like it says in the pasuk, Am keved oven, a nation that is heavy with sin. Therefore, it's called a level of burden. It's something heavy upon the person. But through the tshuva of turning away from bad, meaning we are removing the level of sin, like we spoke about earlier. Then it becomes, I will remove you, I'll take you out from under the burdens of Mitzrayim. I will take you out from under this weight, because you don't have the weight of the sin anymore upon us. And in a simple sense, we could say this as well, that sin is something, Averis is something that weighs us down and make us feel heavy, makes us have a burden and so on. Then he goes on and says, the next expression of Geula, of redemption, is what it says, it is the idea of the tshuva, of the level of doing good. What does that mean? In the word itzalti, there are two meanings. One is the basic meaning that we always explain, in the word saving. Asheni, and the second meaning is lashon sail. It's an expression of a shadow. Hainu sha'atzola nasas ideat sail shubechinas maki. The salvation comes about through a shadow or a shade. That is something that's transcendent, that's above and beyond. Who in kiyam mitzvahs? That's the idea of fulfillment of mitzvahs. Shaydez and nimshach maki b'chinas sail kalam, through mitzvahs. We said before, what comes down, the transcendent light, the level of Soiv Kalalmin. Therefore, since it is something that draws down from that higher level, so from Soiv, therefore we use the term, the term Vitzalti. As the Rebbe says parenthetically, he doesn't enumerate it here. So too concerning the other expressions, I will redeem and I will take. So again, over here he doesn't explain it, but there's a mimer in the commentary on the side. He says there's a mimer in Va'era Tafshin Yud Ches about this. So let's read the commentary on the side of the page, the bottom on the right, line 41 in the commentary. Prati is Yoser, more specifically, the words explain Shevaga'alti Roimez La'avoidish Mitzad Hei Ilah. The word Geula, Alti, I will redeem, indicates that avodah comes as an expression of the higher level of Hey. We're the whole time saying we're working our way up. Shem Yud Kevav, Bechinas Bina, the level of Bina. Zeu inyan hageula shayde avodah mitzad Bina nigala Adam gam bechinas Mitzrayim dekdusha, because that's the idea of Geula, because the avodah that comes about from Bina. You remember we said also one of the ways how to explain it is that it's Reusa, the Liba, the will of the heart, beyond reason and understanding. That's what the Bina brings us to, even a deeper level. So then we go out of even the boundaries of Kedusha. And also Bina has to do with the number 50. There's Chamishim Shari Bina, the 50 gates of Bina. And the number 50, the level of Yovel, Bina is also called in the Zohar Yovel. The number 50 has to do with Geula. It's a time of redemption. The fields go back and the slaves go free. Those that chose, even those that chose to stay longer. So Bina has to do with Geula. So that's why Vigalti, the third lashon that is associated with the cups of wine, has to do with the Sfiras Habina, with the Ois Hey of Yud Kevavki, the first Hey. Top of the commentary on the left side of the page on line 43. And the word lokachti is hinted avoid of tshuva in a way of bittul, and not just any bittul, but like I said, it's the letter yud of Shem Yud Kivavki. The letter yud shows complete bittul, like the bittul of chachma. Chachma is kayachma, the yira ilah, like we said, the highest, most level of yira. Nirmas b'lashon hakasav. How is this hinted in the pasuk? It says, "V'lokachti eschem li," and I will take you to me, or for me. The Chachamim said, Kol makom shenemar li, wherever it uses the expression li, ein noizaz la'olam, it never moves, it always remains. That meaning it's an everlasting thing. So the Rebbe explained how this applies to bittul b'metzias, how this applies to the level of Yud, of Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei, the highest, most level of Tshuva. Kasher Ha'odam Magiel L'Tshuva B'darga Shel Bittul B'metzias, Harei Davik B'mehusei V'atzmusei Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu B'atzma. So then, with a level of Tshuva Bittul B'metzias, he's cleaving in the very essence of the Eibishter himself. And then his service is without any boundaries and without any changes whatsoever. So therefore, we have the term of li einazaz la'olam. When a person is still, there's a yeshes and he has a bitla yesh. So since his ego still exists, so it's a constant battle. Sometimes he goes up, sometimes he goes down. There's changes. Today is not necessarily the same thing like tomorrow. And yesterday is not the same like today was. When we're dealing with that level of bittul mitzias, that's a complete bittul. That's a level where it's constant. Ein azaz la'olam, it's li, and therefore it's always there. That's the level of shuv. Any questions? Okay. Ois Hey, line 15 in the Pnim and page Yud. The reason why tshuva needs to have 4 levels, because this ascent from below to above. Not tshuva. Tshuva is about idea returning to Hashem. We are in a place that's like, for whatever reason, whether it's our own doing or whether it's not our own doing, the neshama left kaviyachol, the closeness of Hashem, and was embedded in a physical body down here. And with Shuvah, the neshama returns upwards. Whether he's returning from Avedas that he did, or the return is a different level where the person's returning in such type of way, they're just lifting himself higher and higher. So since it's about an ascent from below to above, so it has to reflect the drawing down from above to below. The key was just say that since the order of the Hamshacha from below to above comes through the 4 letters of Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei. That's why Yud Kei Vav Kei is related to the word his havas, bringing the world into being, because the individual letters of Yud Kei Vav Kei correspond to the different transitions that has to happen for the world to come into existence, and even for the person, for his neshama to come down here into the world. They need to go through the level of the Yud, which shows on Chachma or Tzimtzum, and then has to go through a Hey, which is Bina or Ispashtus, and then a Vav Amshach, and then a Hey Akroina, which is Malchus. This is the way everything comes down here. So therefore, when we return, we use the same path, the same means, the same developmental process, like the oil uses to come down, the same thing we use to go up. The Rebbe brings down an interesting medrash that reflects this idea of the Hamshacha coming down here through the 4 stages hinted in Yud Kei Vav Kei. The Isra medrash, like it's brought down the medrash, when Hashem wanted to say the Torah to the Yidden, Amora Arba Pamim Arba Pam Benoil Benasmi. The Eibishter like reviewed it. The literal expression, he said it, but it means he reviewed it 4 times by himself before he shared it with the Yidden. The Rebbe, I think, brings us down sometimes. It's a good lesson for us. Before we speak something and before we teach something, we should review it 4 times. If the Eibishter had to review it 4 times before he spoke to us, so how much more so people of our caliber, or people in general? Like it says in the Pasuk in Iyuv, Oz, then Ra, he saw, Vayisapra, and he related it, Echina, he prepared it, V'gam Chokra, and then he investigated it, V'acharkach, the Rebbe adds the words V'acharkach, V'yomer L'Adam, and he told it to the Adam. Meaning, there's 4 things: saw, related, prepared, investigated, and after these 4 expressions, that's what it says he told it to man. This meaning that there are 4 times that Hashem reviews before he delivers the Torah to us is talking about the coming down of Torah through the 4 letters of Yud Kei Vav. Therefore, the order of ascent from below to above that takes place through Tshuva, also has to be through the 4 letters of Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei. That these are the 4 levels of Tshuva, like we said before. The Rebbe goes on to say, it's known, there's the higher level of Havaya and the lower level of Havaya. Like it says, Havaya, that in between the 2 times, many times in the Chumash it says, or sometimes in the Chumash it says, Havaya, like for example, in the Yud Gimel Midas the 13 attributes of mercy. We said it up till this month. We say it every day usually. There is a line indicating a separation in the trup, in the cancellation between the first Havaya and the second Havaya. What does that mean? It's not just that we are repeating it. The same Havaya we're saying just twice. When we say something twice, it's indicating that there's 2 levels of that Havaya. It's brought down in a similar way. It says Hashem called Avram Avinu. It also says that Hashem, out of love, Chazal explain, Hashem called Avram twice. But there's also a separation indicating, because there's Chassidus explains, there's the level of Avram Avinu, the way he's in the Oil Masal Yoinim, and then there's the level of Avram down here. So therefore, there's a separation between them. By Moshe, it says, Chassidus explains, it doesn't have a separation because it indicates that Moshe, the way he's down here, is the same level of Moshe, the way he's above. But upon him, just like we said about Avram Avinu, that the separation in the Torah indicates that there is different levels. The same thing, the 2 twice that we say Havaya indicates that there's 2 levels of Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei. Later, we're actually going to make this actually fits in with another thing. We had, I believe that we speak about it earlier, about the level of the level that the Eibishter told Moshe Rabbeinu concerning Ushmi Havaya lo nodaiti lohem, that my name Havaya was not revealed to them. We said that the Eibishter should not become revealed, the Midas Hamitis, etc. One of the explanations that Chassidus gives for this idea that we say that the others, they had Shem Havaya revealed to them. And when it comes to Moshe Rabbeinu, he tells them, I didn't make my Shem Havaya known to them. So one of the explanations of Chassidus is, the obvious is revelation with Shem Havaya, the Lasata, the lower level of Shem Havaya, and the revelation to Moshe Rabbeinu. It's not just Moshe Rabbeinu, but the whole revelation of Matan Torah is a revelation of Havaya Del Eila, where it says, Anoichi Havaya Lekecha, which the revelation of Matan Torah really began with the whole Yetzias Mitzrayim, is the revelation of Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei, the higher level of Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei. Nimtza, line 3 on page Yud Aleph comes out. The drawing down of from above to below first has to pass through the 4 letters of the higher level of Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei. And then afterwards it has to come down through the 4 letters of Shem Havaya of below, of down here in our world. Now, Derech Agav, it's also brought down the difference between the Shem Havaya Del El and Shem Havaya Del Asata is that the Shem Havaya Del Asata is actually more involved and from the meaning of Ishavus, of bringing the world into being. That lower level Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei has to do with the creation and bringing the world into being. Havaya Del El, the higher level of Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei, that is referring to the level that is beyond Seder Ishtalshlus, is completely, if you will, removed from bringing the world into being. But still, to be able to get there, first you have to go through the 4 letters of the upper level of Shem Havaya to even reach the lower level of Shem Havaya, which is involved in the creation. Therefore, if in the creation of the world, and if in the Hamshacha that comes down by Matan Torah, there has to be all the levels of Shem Havaya, the upper level and the lower level. So the tshuva that we say is preceding it or a result of it, and so on. This is also understood concerning the ascent from below to above through tshuva. First, there has to be the 4 levels of tshuva that correspond to the lower level of Shemitah Vavki. We're working our way upwards. And then there has to be the 4 levels of tshuva that correspond to the upper level of Shem Havaya, though he doesn't really explain the differences between them in the practical tshuva. This is the difference between the 2 ideas. That's in the 4 expressions of Geula. Earlier in the Maimer, we brought different medrashim that speak about the 4 cups of wine, therefore corresponding to them, to the 4 lashonos of Geula. Either the 4 cups of wine is going about how the Yidden were redeemed, and we are marking and we're celebrating and we're drinking wine to indicate the fact that the Yidden were elevated and from the 4 problems and sorrows that took place during Yetzias Mitzrayim. So that's 4 different levels of Geula, 4 different stages of redemption. Or the 4 cups of wine is corresponding to the 4 governments, the 4 nations that the Yidden were enslaved under, that we will be coming out of their enslavement, or we do come out of their enslavement. The Rebbe in the beginning of the Maimer contrasted the 2 and said that in the first level, then the whole idea of the 4 cups of wine, and therefore the 4 expressions, and all the 4 of the Seder then has to do only with Yetzias Mitzrayim. But according to the second explanation, that it has to do with the 4 kingdoms and so on, and it's the redemption from those 4 kingdoms, the final kingdom that we're redeemed from, that's going to be when we're going to be redeemed with Mashiach. So that means in the 4 lashonos and in the 4 cups, it's also hinted the idea of the Geula Asidah. The Rebbe is going to connect these 2 ways of looking at the number 4 by the Haggadah. If the number 4 is solely about Yetzias Mitzrayim, or the number 4 is also about the Geula Asidah, that it has to do with these 2 levels that we said, the 2 levels of tshuva, because we said that tshuva is the preparation for the Geula. How do we reach Geula through tshuva? So it says, line 13 on page Yud Aleph, the 4 expressions of redemption that were said when the Yidden went on Mitzrayim, in Kенeged Arbaa Shem Avaydal Safat. These correspond to the 4 letters of Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei, of below, because we are going out of a lower level of Mitzarim V'Gvulim, of limitations. We are leaving the lowest idea of Ervas Ha'aretz and Memtes Shari Tumah, and so on and so forth, that we are really crawling out of the lowest place. But we're first working our way up the first 4 letters of Yud Kei Vav Kei. The Arba Lashonos of Geula K'neged Arba Malchis are the 4 expressions of Geula that correspond to the 4 governments that we will be redeemed from. Shubehem Nichlalas Gama Geula Asidah, in that is also included the future redemption. And K'neged Arba Oisei Shem Avaydal La'ela, these correspond to the 4 letters of Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei of above. That is the further level that we're working our way up. So essentially, we could say that one has to do it now and one has to do it later, but it's not that way. We drink the 4 cups of wine, we drink it by the Seder. Why we drink it by the Seder? The Rebbe says in Oisvav, Omnam gam b'chag Pesach ato, yeshnoi me'ein ha'gula asidah. By the Pesach Seder itself, we already have a part of the future redemption. Arba hakoises, or similar to the future redemption, and it's the opening and it's leading into the future redemption. Arba hakoises the Pesach gam K'neged Arba Geulas. It's not just the 4 expressions that was used over there by Tzeisi, V'lakachti, V'galti, etc. correspond to that. But the 4 cups, we're drinking it by the Seder night. We are also being included in those 4 cups, the Geula Asidah. So therefore, we find the gam k'neged hakoyses sheyulasid lavi. There's also another thing that says when Mashiach comes, that the nations of the world will be given to drink 4 cups of punishment. What does that mean? That already now, already by the Pesach Seder, we have this as well. Derech Agav, there is a geschmacke idea that the Rebbe puts forth, that not only there's the classic concept that we know that the first 2 days of Pesach has to do with Yitzias Mitzrayim, that's why we make Shechianu. The final days has to do with the Gula Asidah, that's why we don't make a Shechianu, especially the last day of Pesach. But even more so, the Rebbe explains that the Seder itself, the beginning of the Seder versus the second half of the Seder has a demarcation line between the Mitzias Mitzrayim and the Geula Hasidah. The first part of the Seder is primarily speaking about and recollecting things of going on in Mitzrayim. And then we say the first 2 Pratim and Hallel, but say Yisrael and Mitzrayim, and then we stop. And then we interrupt with the meal. And then we conclude the Hallel. Why do we do that? Because the rest of the Seder and the rest of the Hallel, and the truth is, in the meal itself, there's a division as well. Maybe we'll share it sometime. But the rest of the Hallel and the rest of the Seder is all about the future redemption. That's why we don't pour Kaiser Shal Eliyahu at the beginning of the Seder. Why do we wait when inviting the Eliyahu Navi till like the end? The Rebbe speaks about, there's a question, do you pour it before benching or after benching? But the sooner the better, so we'll pour it before benching. If the sooner the better, why don't you pour it right away when you sit down to Kiddush? Pour a cup of wine for Eliyahu Navi. But the first part of the Seder is primarily about the level of Yitzias Mitzrayim. The latter half of the Seder begins, we're talking about all the things that will occur when Mashiach comes, and that's the time when we pour the Kaiser Shal Eliyahu. That's the time when we're dealing with the future redemption. But be that as it may, we see that already in the Seder is not just the 4 levels having to do with Yitzias Mitzrayim, not just the initial level of Yud Kei Vav Kei, but even the higher level of Yud Kei Vav Kei, the level of Yud Kei Vav Kei that has to do with the Geula Hasidah. Line 22. That also comes down to the revelation of the light of the higher level of Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei. Now the Rebbe adds another thing. Because of its great level, that's why it could descend even the lowest to the lowest place. Is the Priyat Chaim, like it's brought on Kabbalah, we know through different mitzvahs and through different Yom Tovim, there becomes a union between the different spheres, and the union that takes place on the night of Pesach is in the world of Asiyah, which means the lowest of the spiritual realms. Because the revelation is so powerful, it reaches down so low. It's like we had recently in Tanya, the Rebbe explains over there in Hagah, that what does it mean when we say that Kabbalah is Natzilus and Chumash is in the world of Asiyah? Well, the entire Torah comes from the world of Atzilus. What we're saying is like this. Kabbalah, for example, is too high to come down from Atzilus any lower. And physically, practically as well. It's something that's beyond our perception. Then Gemara is in the world of Bria. It comes down lower. It's already more perceived, but it's not perceived to everybody and not that as easily, and we got to work harder for that. Mishnayos is the level of Atzilus that reaches down even to the world of Yitzirah. And therefore, it's easier to comprehend, and even someone of a lesser capability, a younger child, can learn Mishnayos, even though he's not yet up to learning Gemara. And Chumash comes all the way down to the world of Asiyah, but not that it's the world of Asiyah. It's from the world of Atzilus that reaches down all the way to the world of Asiyah. The same thing over here. The Rebbe says that the level of revelation on the night of the Seder, on the night of Pesach, is so powerful that it's even incorporating the Shem Havayda La'ela, even incorporating the revelation of Mashiach's times, and it comes down here in the most physical way. And we should have that actually, that this Seder, we should actually have that revelation that we should already be eating the Karban Pesach in Yerushalayim with the Rebbe and all the revelations of godliness down here in our world. Any questions?